and officers to this meeting of the Cabinet, which will be held as a hybrid meeting. The open part of the meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting either from the Council chamber or from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their microphones on and where remote, their cameras on at that point, but I would ask that with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimize any background noise and interference and ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Whether in the chamber or remote, if any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order that I receive requests. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. I would also ask officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. Officers too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use, please. We will now proceed to agenda business, and the first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence, and all members of the Cabinet are present and all members of the Corporate Management Board are present. I do know that the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing will have to leave partway through the meeting to attend a Regional Safeguarding Board meeting. Thank you, Claire. And of course, your reports are the first reports we'll be considering on the agenda for today's meeting. If there are no apologies for absence, we'll now move on to declarations of personal and prejudicial interest, if any, from members and officers in accordance with the provision of the Members' Code of Conduct adopted by Council in September 2008. Councillor Spanzik, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to declare prejudicial interest in item 4, 3-year sustainable plan to improve children outcome for children and family services due to a close family member being involved with this at the moment. So I will leave at that point, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik. Next, we have Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader. Personal interest in item 12 as my school governor in Porthcawl Comp, sorry.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farr. Then we have Councillor Blundell, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Same agenda item 12, personal interest as a Governor of Bryn Tirion Comprehensive, who we're appointing a Governor to today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Blundell. And if any interests are identified during the course of the meeting, then please, of course, raise your hand at that stage and I will take it then. Deputy Leader, please.
Same item, Chair. I'm a Governor on Mynydd Cemvig Primary, and you have an applicant in the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. We now have for approval the minutes of the last meeting of the Cabinet of Council, and the minutes are of the meeting held on the 18th of July. Do I have a mover, please, that they are a true and accurate record of that meeting? Thank you, Councillor Farr.
Yeah, move them.
Seconder, please.
Second, Leader.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. All in agreement? Thank you. Colleagues, we'll now receive the first report on today's agenda, and that is a report of the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing, and it is on the 3-year sustainability plan to improve outcomes for children and families across Bridgend County Borough. Claire, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Claire Marchant, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing. So the plan for consideration this afternoon is a 3-year plan to sustainably improve outcomes for children and families in Bridgend. Cabinet approval of this plan is sought today. There is a further paper for consideration tomorrow by Council on the in-year financial implications of delivering safe and effective services for children and families. The context for the development of this plan is the need for a sustainable service and financial plan which sets a clear direction for services for children and families in the County Borough. Cabinet will be well aware that statutory children's services experienced significant challenge in meeting statutory duties in early 2022. Cabinet set out and supported a set of immediate actions which supported improvement over the last 18 months, and you approved a plan which set out those actions in February 2022 and assigned significant short-term resource to the service to stabilise the workforce position. These actions were key to ensuring that children were safeguarded from harm, and we've been under close regulatory scrutiny over that last 18 months, and Care Inspectorate Wales have been assured in their improvement check and subsequent joint inspection of child protection arrangements that are now referred to as a JICPA that was published last week that improvements are evident. They have, however, continued to be clear on the need for a sustainable operating model to address our workforce rigidity. And in the recent JICPA, they highlighted some anxiety of frontline staff that the support which they've received to date might be short-term and the impact that that would have. The plan for consideration has been developed following a very detailed expert review by the Institute of Public Care, who are experts in the field, which has not only analysed the data in Bridgend, but reviewed and evaluated good practice across England and Wales and built in a number of case studies of good practice in Welsh local authorities. The review was welcomed by the joint inspectors in their recent JICPA, stating that it is positive that the local authority has commissioned an independent review of children's services to evaluate its operating model. Early help and edge of care services are included in this review to maximise the use of all available resources to prevent escalation of need. In summary, the review findings accorded with the Directorate's own analysis and the themes in inspection reports. The key changes needed to enable sustainable improvement over time, which are set out in the 3-year plan, are sufficiency of workforce who are largely permanent, well supported and with practice level caseloads in line with best practice. Building on good practice from other local authorities where there has been a sustainable reduction in children and families open to statutory children's services, a new operating model to be implemented in which prevention is targeted at the edge of statutory interventions. There is a clear evidence base, both from an extensive literature review and from the experiences of neighbouring authorities, that targeted interventions will make a real difference in this regard. This is a view which is also supported by our key partners, and we undertook extensive engagement on this plan over the summer period. South Wales Police commented that while it would appear counterintuitive to target early intervention and prevention resource closer to the thresholds of statutory intervention, I hold the view that with finite resources, this provides the greatest opportunity to prevent serious harm, avoid service fragmentation which exists within universal services, and create capacity in our statutory provision at a time when it faces unprecedented demand. A prudent approach to resource allocation is required to ensure the right help is available at the right time. The next theme within the plan is that we need to continue to focus on implementation of our Signs of Safety model of practice. Having made good initial progress on the implementation, the ongoing need for systematic implementation embedding new ways of working. It was made clear in the recent JICPA reports that time is now required to consolidate and digest the messages about practice and address variability. We need to commission the right quantum and quality of support, and this covers all range of support from very highly regulated residential services to preventative services. We need to be absolutely vigilant in being clear about the evidence base of interventions. This is a challenging area for all authorities, and we have seen increasing numbers of children having to be accommodated in independent residential settings. But for us here in Bridgend, there's really good news in this area at the moment, in that we've opened, after a long development period, our new in-house residential assessment unit. The theme of this plan requires evidence-based commissioning strategies to be delivered for all areas of services for children and families over the next 3 years. The next theme within the plan was also a strong theme within the recent JICPA, strong and effective partnership working. Partnership working has always been a strength in Bridgend, and the JICPA evidence that there is a clear and common vision for safeguarding in Bridgend. Partnership working needs to continue in line with this plan, and that includes working co-productively with children and families, and we've got some good initial success in this area as well in our corporate parenting work. This plan has also been developed in the context of both an unprecedented increase in need and demand for children's social care. As 3.5 of the report sets out, the increases in contacts, assessments, safeguarding investigations and child protection registrations. This increase in need and demand, whilst being generated across the whole system, is being channelled, particularly at this moment in time, into statutory children's services. Alongside that increase in demand, we are in a uniquely challenging position in terms of workforce. To meet need and demand, the service has been operating considerably above establishment and with an over-reliance on an agency workforce. The plan consolidates the current and future actions required to improve this position over the timescales within this plan. Key to this are a set of actions to support the well-being of the current workforce, and in the engagement that we did with the workforce over the summer period, that was really evident that we need to really focus on the support for our current workforce and retention, as well as all the recruitment activities that we're undertaking. What I would say as well, that we do continue to focus on recruitment, and we will continue through the actions in this plan our endeavours around international recruitment and growing our own social worker programme. The plan has been subject, as I've indicated, to extensive consultation and engagement over the summer period with children and the public, key partners, Welsh Government and our own workforce. There's been strong support for the themes and priorities, and the feedback from Welsh Government in relation to their new policy framework for transforming services for children and families, and for the South Wales Police, who are very clear in the need to target preventative services, has been incorporated into the plan. Positively, respondees to surveys and the children and young people engaged with were agreed with the themes within the plan. Part 8 of the report sets out in some detail the financial implications of safeguarding children in Bridgend. In summary, as set out in 8.10, there is a £3.551 million gap, I should say that slowly, in relation to what is needed to safely provide services for children. There will be a recommendation to Council tomorrow, if Cabinet is so minded to approve the recommendations of this report, that £1 million be provided in year, and a further information regarding the repurposing of earmarked reserves following a very detailed review. As set out in 8.17, further work will be undertaken in year as part of the very challenging medium-term financial strategy planning to identify how the 2.5 million shortfall could possibly be addressed. The recommendations that Cabinet is asked to consider are set out in part 9 of the report, and very happy to take any questions. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that report, Claire. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I think this report has been a long time coming to this council chamber, and I'm delighted to formally move this plan. I appreciate it is a change to our operating model, but it is a sustainable plan which we need to ensure the safety of our residents. All evidence that we've collated during this process, including that of our independent advisors, the Institute of Public Care, Care Inspectorate Wales and JICPA, the Joint Inspectorate, are indicating that a 3-year sustainability plan to improve the outcomes for children and family services in Bridgend is essential. These changes have been instrumental in ensuring the sustainability of children's services in other local authorities across Wales, Indeed, we are the only local authority in Wales with our current operating model, which is quite separate of set of arrangements. We do need to think about our families out there, and I'm more than happy to move, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Next, we have Councillor Blundell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll second the motion there from the Deputy Leader. But the question the statement and then question I really wanted to make was, obviously you mentioned the JICPA there, which obviously education was part of as well. We were JICPA'd, as we've come to call it. It's good to see that they are endorsing our direction of travel, really. Has CIW as well endorsed this movement forward and how we're progressing this way forward? And are they happy with the progress that we're making, considering where we were probably back at around the elections before we came into post?
Yeah,
thank you
very
for
much
that, Councillor Blundell.
Yeah, sorry, Leader. Yeah, it is a new verb, isn't it? JICPA'd. It certainly felt like that, I think, for those of us who were part of that process. Yes, I would say that the joint inspection, and it was a joint report which all inspectorates who took part, all four, put their names to, was very positive about the fact that we had conducted this review. We shared an early draft because we hadn't gone through the engagement process at that point, and it certainly wasn't a stage to come into the public domain with them, and that led them to make a statement that they welcomed and were positive about the fact that we were taking the review forward. I think in fairness to inspectorates, they are very cognizant of the financial position that authorities find themselves in. They're undertaking these inspections across Wales, and they were very clear when they wrote that report about the need to prioritise scarce resources, and that features in the report as well. In terms of whether they are content with the progress that we're making, when they undertook the inspection back in May last year, the dates sort of muddle, they had serious concerns about the position of the authority. When they came back in November last year, that position had moved on because they were content that we had made the rapid progress they needed to see, and they categorised us as an authority that requires improvement. And in their own press release accompanying the JICPA, they evidenced that they had continued to see improvements. That's not to be complacent, because there clearly are improvements that continue to need to be made, particularly around workforce. And that's very clear, I think, in terms of the way that this plan is set out.
Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Yeah, I should say, I apologise. I should have used their full title, Care Inspectorate Wales, not CIW, for the DEP tells me off for using that. The right terminology. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Blundell. Next, we have Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader. I've got two questions. Shall I ask them both at the same time?
Yes, please.
Okay, Claire, the report, thank you for the report. It's very, very thorough. It identifies that BCBC have several pathways to access support for family and children. How will we address this if we work in the new way? That's my first question. Second question, where will the focus be with this plan? What will be delivered differently and how? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. You're right, Councillor Farr. I think the review that we've undertaken has identified multiple points of access. Now, I'm always very reticent to say there'll be a single point of access, because life isn't like that. You know, people access services and come into services in the way that suits them. But what we can try to do is to reduce the points of access and to make it simpler from the perspective of children and families who are looking for support. So one of the actions within the plan is to develop a single point of access for children's social care, including early help and preventative services. And then to develop a true single process and what we would call a no wrong door process for managing contacts and referrals to early help and children's social care, working across the existing continuum of care framework, so all those services in one place. There's some really good examples in other parts of Wales. So for example, the Gwent local authorities to work to something called a space panel, where, and don't ask me what that stands for, because it probably stands for something, but all preventative services come together around school cluster footprints, and then what they do is right person, right place, right time, and nobody falls through a gap. So reducing handoffs between services, reducing the need for cross referrals, waiting lists between services. It is that commitment, and those are the sorts of arrangements we want to look to implement here in Bridgend within some clear timescales. In terms of where the focus will be, very clearly we want to focus in a very evidence-based way on those interventions which will prevent escalation of need. So it's about getting in time, isn't it, in terms of those interventions. So we've got a really good offer here in Bridgend in terms of universal services. We actually largely do well when children and families come into statutory services, but there are some gaps between those good universal services and that statutory. And what we need to do is to rebalance to make sure that we've got the right interventions at the right time. The JICPA report referred to the fact again that thresholds are largely right, but when they looked at individual cases, they could see opportunities were missed in terms of preventative work sooner with children and families, and it's those things that we're going to seek to address through this new operating model.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer, Claire. And I know we'd all welcome further progress towards achieving that goal of no wrong door, because whichever door a family comes through or another partner comes through, we need to make sure that the family, the child, gets the support and help that they need, and we need to make sure there are fewer delays and fewer handoffs between different teams, because not only is that costly in terms of officers' time, more importantly, that can delay the support and help that we want our families and children to receive. I can see that Councillor Williams is next, please. Councillor Williams.
I knew it was something I had to do. Bit of a mind block this morning. Right. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Director, for presenting the report. I'm happy to support the report. I certainly recognise the amount of work that's gone into to bringing this plan before us, and obviously I'm very pleased that we're using best practice from other authorities. But I suppose my question is going to be about review and monitoring to ensure that we're on track as we go forward. A 3-year plan is okay, but it needs constant review, constant monitoring, just to make sure that we are hitting the targets that we want to be hitting. So could you just appraise how we're going to review and monitor? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. That's a good question. Claire.
Sorry, I'm ahead of myself today. Thank you for the question. It's absolutely critical, isn't it, that we've got that oversight at all times about whether this is working in the direction that we seek. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is establishing a social services improvement board. I think you will be a member of that, Councillor Williams, chaired by the Leader of Council, with the Deputy Leader and members of the Corporate Management Board. It's really important when we've drafted the terms of reference for that, and again, learning from good practice, actually good practice within the authority from the school in improvement group which meets, that we are looking at evidence and data. We're looking at financial performance alongside service performance, alongside the workforce position, and really getting key actions drilled down if we do need to make adjustments. We actually had a very helpful scrutiny session on the 3-year plan back in July. One of the recommendations from scrutiny was to be tighter around the impact and the performance measures, and you can see those set out both within the plan and in 4.6 of the cover report. So, those are the key indicators that we will be measuring. I think alongside the quantitative performance measures, and we've been generally quite good at quantitative performance, we've got to make sure that we've got the qualitative measures as well. We still are too variable in our practice and in terms of outcomes, so we've got to make sure we've got that quality assurance as well as quantitative, as well as financial and workforce performance, and all of that will come to the improvement board.
Thank you for that important question, Councillor Williams, and that reassurance from the corporate director. We will have to carefully monitor, as we have done, the progress that is made to make sure that that progress is maintained, and that any changes that we do make do benefit the children and families of the county borough of Bridgend. You've referenced in the report, and of course it isn't, you've referenced in your verbal report, an overview of the report, the outcome of the joint inspection. Of course, that hasn't featured in a written report yet because it's just been published. We will, of course, receive a written report on that inspection. It will be important that we reflect upon that as an authority, and indeed all partners reflect on that, because that joint inspection is indeed a very important reminder to all our communities that protecting children is not the sole business of this authority. It is a joint effort with partners, not least South Wales Police and Cwm Taf Morgannwg University Health Board and others as well, and will want to reflect and indeed ensure that the recommendations arising from that report, those recommendations are implemented not only by this authority but by our partner agencies as well, by the Health Board, by South Wales Police, by our schools, if there are any schools, and other agencies, including the probation service as well. Recommendations been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with the recommendations, colleagues? And of course, we will discuss this, no doubt, further in full council tomorrow, and indeed we'll be discussing the financial implications of this as well. That's a question that I know has been asked by colleagues, but we'll discuss that tomorrow. That's the appropriate place for a discussion of the financial implications. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now move on to the second report from the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing, and that is a report on the policy to implement across the Directorate supporting children who will look to settle in the UK. But we won't start the report until Councillor Spanzik is back into the chamber, and he's just been fetched as I speak. Claire, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. The second report from me this afternoon is to set out for Cabinet consideration a new policy which is attached as Appendix 1 to the report this afternoon to support care experienced children and young people who have the right to settle within the UK under the European Union settlement scheme. So, as members will know, following the UK decision to leave the EU, the UK government created the EU settlement scheme to support those who are eligible to settle and remain in the UK. The deadline for the scheme was initially the 30th of June 2021. In establishing that scheme and to ensure that the rights of care experienced children and care leavers were safeguarded and were appropriately supported to resettle in the UK. They established as an arm of the Home Office an organisation called an Independent Monitoring Authority, who is going around all local authorities in the UK to look at how they're supporting care leavers and care experienced children to resettle. Wales was the pilot area, and they reviewed every authority in Wales. They came to us here in Bridgend, and they found that our arrangements were generally fine, but they did recommend to us that we should have a specific policy in this area, and we've again drawn on good practice from elsewhere in Wales to develop the policy that you have in front of you for consideration this afternoon. So this policy has been developed through appropriate engagement across our directorate, and as I say, drawing on good practice, and indeed working with the Independent Monitoring Authority themselves. This policy is set out in 3.4, sets out the following arrangements, how we determine eligibility, the processes we have for supporting children to achieve that settled status, and how we would disseminate this policy in terms of our workforce. In advance of this policy being in place, we have supported only a very small number of children so far through the resettlement scheme. But I think this policy would, if approved by Cabinet this afternoon, puts us in good stead for our workforce to understand their responsibilities. And indeed, when their latest review of us, the Independent Monitoring Authority has moved us from an amber rating to a green rating, which was very pleasing. So if I take you to recommendation under Part 9 of the report, it's recommended that Cabinet consider and approve the new policy for the European Union Settlement Scheme as attached as Appendix 1.
Thank you, Claire. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you very much for the report, Claire. I can't stress enough the importance of this. If I take Cabinet colleagues to page 68, 6.5, and actually the word in there just describes what each individual young person who we are putting on this scheme and why we are putting them on this scheme, and it's actually quite upsetting in cases where the child is being accommodated because there is no one with parental responsibility for the child, or the child is lost and abandoned. That gives you some indication of where this young person is sitting and why it's so important that we look after their best interests. Thanks very much, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Councillor Good is next, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Claire, for the report. And I think it almost goes beyond that. I think it's really important that we're safeguarding anyone who has the right to remain in the UK from the EU through the EUSS is respected and supported. And it's really heartening to hear that we are putting this policy in place to make sure that those children and those young people who are least able to perhaps understand or access the support they need to go through what is often a complex process, not always made easier by the UK government. So I think it's really pleasing to hear that. But just for the sake of completion, do we have any idea of, you mentioned sort of low numbers that we're supporting, but do we have any idea of specific numbers?
2.
Thank you, Councillor Good. Thank you, Claire. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much. It was actually a topic for discussion. Where was I yesterday? I can't even remember what meeting I was in, but I was in a meeting with ministers, and they are expecting that number to increase significantly across Wales. So I think it's quite right and proper that we safeguard everybody.
Thanks, Deputy Leader. And of course, as good corporate parents, because we must act as corporate parents, then we would want the children and young people that we are responsible for to have those rights that they are eligible for, those rights to be protected, because with citizenship comes certain rights, and it's our responsibility as good corporate parents to ensure that those rights of those very vulnerable children and young people are protected. So the recommendation's been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please? Thank you. We'll now receive the report of the Corporate Director for Communities, and that is a report on the High Bont project, and the next steps in the HyBond project. Janine, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader. Thank you for that. For the purposes of the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director for Communities. So, Cabinet, this is not a report that I want to bring to you willingly today. We are hugely committed to our Net Zero 2030 strategy and looking at new energy sources for the future here in Bridgend. As you know, in fact, one of our corporate plan objectives is a net zero piece. However, our current challenging budget position has unfortunately necessitated this report today. What I want to say really is that HyBont is a multi-million pound project, over £40 million in estimated worth, with partners including Marubeni Europower Limited, funded by NEDO, a NEDO scheme from Japanese government, with partners such as Welsh Government, the Cardiff Capital Region, and ourselves. And it's also very complex in design, the project itself. So I would say that I'd like to spend some time this afternoon just to take you through this report so that you can make an informed decision on the way forward, because it will be a difficult decision in front of us this afternoon. So the report will provide a review of the HyBont project to date, and will ask you, Cabinet, to determine the way forward. It outlines what are currently considered to be the next steps and the associated costs if Cabinet agree for the Council to continue in its current role in the project. So if I just give you a little bit of background really to where we've got to. I mean, I know we've done this previously, but I think it would be valid today to really go back through all of that. So in 2021, Welsh Government were approached by a Japanese consortium, Marubeni Europower. Now, they are global specialists in renewables and hydrogen projects, and they asked the Welsh Government if they were interested in an investment opportunity for a hydrogen demonstrator project to show that technology. And Welsh Government then selected BCBC as the local authority to look to work alongside Japanese government as part of the implementation of this project. Now, Japanese government's New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization, NEDO, that's the shortened version, had pledged £13 million to co-fund this hydrogen power demonstration project, and the Marubeni Corporation in the UK would give the rest. And the key to this project really was the supply of green hydrogen power for heat and transportation using green energy sources. Now, whilst the project was classed as a demonstrator initially, it was not demonstrating hydrogen production itself. That is, using an electrolyzer to produce hydrogen, because this is not new technology. Now, that's currently used in 16 other locations in the UK currently, and there's a wide application of hydrogen production in Europe and worldwide. And just some examples of other hydrogen production in existence in the UK include, for instance, Aberdeen City Council with their bus fleet runs on hydrogen. We've got Wrightbus in Northern Ireland, and also there's a really interesting project in Birmingham called Hydroflex. It's quite groundbreaking, and it's a partnership between the University of Birmingham and Porterbrook, supported by a £750,000 grant from UK government to look at developing a hydrogen-powered application that you can retrofit into diesel trains. There's an awful lot going on in the future. So, put simply, the HyBont project demonstrator component is not the production itself, but it's the software that is being planned to use. That's the demonstrator piece. This software will work to assess demand for hydrogen and match it to the times when it's cheapest to produce, so both lowering the costs of production and reducing waste and making the process more efficient, essentially. Now, that software component is what is being funded for demonstration via the proposed HyBont project, and not the production of hydrogen itself. Now, the solution proposed by Marubeni for HyBont comprises a hydrogen production plant, a very small hydrogen production plant with electrolyzers that generate hydrogen from electric power by splitting water, hydrogen storage and a hydrogen refuelling station at Bryn Melyn Industrial Estate. And then the intention is to use that green hydrogen to supply transport users, such as, for instance, at one point our refuse collection vehicles, some buses and some light vehicles. And the Bryn Melyn site would act as the refuelling station. There was also a plan to look at possible heat use at an Ynysoudra heat cluster, including the secondary school, primary school and leisure centre. And you would use a 1.2 kilometre long hydrogen pipeline which would go to the energy centre, so you could look to produce green heat in those facilities. Now, currently, Marubeni and ourselves, BCBC, are operating under a Memorandum of Understanding, which was signed back on the 8th of July in 2022. And that sets out the working arrangements and the next steps between us and Marubeni towards completing a legally binding joint development agreement, that is to develop the facility. This remains dependent, of course, upon agreement on the procurement exemptions being developed by our external legal advisors, Blake Morgan. And Cardiff Capital Region is also involved as a potential shareholder in the operational project. Now, back in March of this year, DESNZ, the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, notified Marubeni that a bid for the low carbon hydrogen net zero hydrogen business case fund, gosh, that's a very long name, they put a bid in to request a subsidy to support non-transport hydrogen uses. So in essence, Marubeni are applying to UK government to subsidise the cost of hydrogen. And that grant is being worked through for UK government the last quarter of this year, 23. The other thing that is going on currently, or has been, is due diligence. Now, due diligence contractors have been engaged by CCR, the Cardiff Capital Region, with OVARUP appointed to complete engineering, procurement and construction technical review of the project and ongoing technical due diligence. There are some due diligence activities that cannot be shared with CCR and will need to be directly commissioned by BCBC, and this is to protect our own best interests. Now, to date, the project is still being developed and we are undertaking the due diligence. However, Marubeni Europower has submitted a formal planning application for the hydrogen production facility at the Bryn Melyn Industrial Estate and also for the solar farm at Bryn Celyn site. Now, the planning application can only determine if the proposed land use is appropriate for the location and nothing else. Planning is just about land use. All matters of site safety and operation will be subject to a Control of Hazardous Substances licence application, which is a completely separate statutory process. Now, BCBC are the local planning authority, and planning officers are currently assessing the application as has been submitted. Now, Welsh Government have reserved the right to call in this planning application, subject to seeing the planning officer's report and recommendation, and that is their right. But a Development Control Committee date cannot be set by BCBC until that process has been undertaken. Now, to date, the Control of Hazardous Substance licence has not been submitted by Marubeni, and whilst it is for us at BCBC to grant that licence through our Development Control Committee, it may only do so upon completion of consultation with statutory consultees and regulators, such as Natural Resources Wales and the Health and Safety Executive. And it is only if those two bodies deem that licence application appropriate can our Development Control Committee grant that licence. So I just wanted to make those two things clear, that the planning is about land use only, and Welsh Government want to see the report first before they will determine if they want to call it in, and then the hazardous substance control licence will be, when submitted, we will undertake consultation with Natural Resources Wales and the Health and Safety Executive. And those two processes go on regardless of whether we stay as part of the Highborn project or not, because they are our statutory responsibilities. So if I take you to section 3 of the report and take you through the current situation that we have. So the council is not the developer for this project, Marubeni is. And as such, it is Marubeni's responsibility to take forward the planning application, the detailed design and the project financing. Now, BCBC would be a customer with offtake agreements in place for the hydrogen to fuel any refuse collection vehicles and any potential heat network. And we could also be a shareholder in the joint venture company that we set up. Therefore, the thing that is critical for us to do as a council is to undertake an appropriate level of due diligence before being able to sign up to any of the required commercial agreements. Now, technical due diligence is required to verify that the solutions that are designed by Marubeni are effective, they're deliverable, and they will produce the benefits that are proposed. Now, BCBC does not have a core budget to support the development of this project. And to date, any funding required has been identified either through grants, as and when they've become available, or through Community Directorate in-year underspend, or via an allocation for net zero carbon projects. Now, given the size, scale and potential significance of this project, there is an ongoing risk for BCBC and the current project timetable. And that's why it's imperative that we undertake this review at this stage to recognise the financial commitment to BCBC of continuing this project. Now, to date, we've undertaken quite a bit of legal work and legal due diligence, and section 3.3 of the report outlines that. None of these have been finalised or executed yet. It includes a joint development agreement, how we will build that plant, a hydrogen supply agreement, us being an off-taker, and a shareholder agreement to look at how the company will be set up. Now, we were at BCBC awarded grant funding by the Heat Network Development Unit, HINDU, that's UK government, to develop a detailed project design to assess the viability of the heat network concept and to produce an outline business case. This will enable BCBC to decide whether to submit a planning application or any other necessary consents to take that part of the project forward. We've also done quite a bit of due diligence and in-vehicle monitoring of the refuse collection vehicles. We conducted that back in August 22, and we analysed the data, and it showed that 5 of our refuse collection routes can't be serviced by electric vehicles and therefore would be suitable for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Now, we need to do further technical work on this to develop the business case commercially and to understand what type of ultra-low emission vehicle will be the most effective long-term solution for us. The other point to raise at this time is there is no dedicated project management for this currently, and if the project does continue, Cabinet, we will need to recruit or commission further resource for this project. Now, 3.8 in the report details a lot of the work that's been undertaken to date. However, what is clear is without future funding committed to this project, BCBC will not be able to continue with the project and with the timescale as detailed, and we will have to discuss with all the partners and the stakeholders an alternative model for delivery. And this would also be required if there was a lengthy period for BCBC to secure those resources. I won't dwell on the work when you do the milestones because they are detailed in Table 1 in your report. I mean, what is clear at this point is that innovative projects such as this do have benefits in terms of carbon savings, and these are set out in the report. However, a point I must make clear here is when BCBC were first approached by Welsh Government back in 2021 to ask if we were interested in an investment opportunity for this demonstrator, it was not clear really at that point the substantial revenue and capital implications that would follow and which would be needed to be invested by BCBC. and that we now know. The reliance on external funding and grant sources to assist with this project was a financial risk that we did set out in a Cabinet report in July 22. Therefore, to continue the project as a proposed equity shareholder and to undertake the necessary due diligence that we need to undertake, it is now estimated to cost an additional £525,000 over and above the revenue funding that has already been committed. I have to also advise Cabinet that there will be significant capital implications, not only to fund the new hydrogen RCVs, refuse collection vehicles, but to install any proposed heat work, and they're set out in section 8 of the report that I will come to. So at this critical point in the project, Cabinet, we are asking now for you to decide on the way forward, taking into account the potential benefits that could be derived from this project, but of course set against the funding requirements and our very challenging medium-term financial strategy. So taking into account all of the information, the options for consideration at this stage are twofold. Option A is for Cabinet to identify the necessary resources required, as set out in detail in section 8 of the report, that the Council continues to work with all key stakeholders, including Marubeni, Cardiff Capital Region and Welsh Government, and continues to undertake the due diligence activities on this project until the next proposed gateway. That's option A. Or option B is that due to our challenging financial budget and our MTFS issues, Cabinet makes the decision for BCBC to withdraw its involvement in the project due to its inability to meet the significant financial commitments required and the timescales of the project. However, that dialogue should continue with partners, including Marubeni, CCR and Welsh Government, to identify an alternative route forward. Now, before we come to our recommendation in the report, I do want to briefly look at section 8 of the report, which talks about the financial implications in detail. So over the past 2 years, BCBC has committed £293,000 on the delivery of specific milestones for High Bont. We've committed money for legal support, we got some money from Hindu for the new heat network, 151,000, and we got money for project management resource. However, the actual spend that we have committed to date is 149,000. But for BCBC to complete the required forthcoming milestones, it is currently considered that a revenue budget in the region, as we said, of 525,000 is required, and the breakdown is shown in table 2 in the report, and there is currently no revenue, I'm afraid, secured to meet these milestones. Of course, we have talked about the capital implications, but just to remind you, should we enter delivery stage, the funding route identified for the hydrogen fuel cell refuse collection vehicles, we could get some money from the Welsh Government Circular Economy Fund. This is not guaranteed, but it's estimated that the costs of a new hydrogen refuse collection fleet could be circa 3 million, of which we could get 1.5 million from Welsh Government, subject to approval, and funding from ourselves. And there's also a capital requirement for the heat network that we have looked at previously, estimated to be between 4 and 4.5 million. So it's very clear that set against the backdrop of our current financial situation and budget challenges, the significant resourcing required, circa 525,000 of additional revenue, and capital circa 6 million, this project will be extremely difficult to resolve. So, Leader and Cabinet, I take you to the recommendations contained in section 9 of the report. And the first is that you note the report and all of the detailed work that has been undertaken to date. And recommendation 2 is our officer recommendation that you pursue option B and withdraw from the project at this stage due to our inability to meet the significant financial commitments. However, that we do, the Council has a dialogue with partners, including Marubeni and Welsh Government, to see if we can find an alternative route forward. And then, of course, recommendation 3, to delegate authority to myself with the Section 151 officer and the monitoring officer to give notice to Marubeni of our intention to withdraw from the Memorandum of Understanding that we signed back in 2022. So I'll stop there, pause there, Leader.
Thank you for that comprehensive report, Janine. There's a number of Cabinet members that have indicated they would like to speak, so I'll take them in turn. And first of all, we have Councillor Spanzik, please.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you, Janine. I can't say I welcome the report. No one thought we were having this report before us, but it is a realistic report and is realistic of where we are as an authority, very similar to many other authorities in Wales and across the country. And we've seen examples lately with Birmingham City, Birmingham Council, and we have to be realistic of where we are today and where we're going to be in the future financially. And it's not a great picture at the moment where we have to struggle and make sure we prioritize every penny we spend. I think it was only 2 months ago I sat in this chamber and said we're a budget meeting that every officer, every directorate needs to look at every penny they spend across the board. And we have to do the same as Cabinet when we have this before us today. And while I'm more than convinced that green hydrogen is part of net zero, it's part of the future, whether it's Bridgend, Wales, UK or worldwide, green hydrogen is part of the future. What we are not at the moment is in a financial position to be part of that partnership with Marubeni or with any other company at the moment. We have to concentrate and prioritise our revenue funds and capital, but definitely revenue at the moment, on our core services. I know we're going to struggle as the months go ahead with the next year's revenue budget, and we've got things that matter to the public out there we represent, and one of those big issues we've got to deal with soon is public transport. At this moment in time, we're not sure where we're going to find revenue funding to keep public transport running next year. So we can't be seen to be rightly or wrongly investing in things like this when we have to deal with those core services. We have a report later on waste. We have to provide our waste services, and that's going to increase next year, the cost. So there's some key things there we have to deal with, and unfortunately, the Gen Council can't act on behalf of the whole of Wales on this. This needs to be taken up perhaps by whether it's Welsh Government or CCR, where they'll still have their financial difficulties, but this is more than just a Bridgend project. This is a bigger project, which whether it proceeds in Bridgend, and who knows where it will end, but green hydrogen is here to stay. It will be happening, whether it's Bridgend or not, in Wales and the UK. But as we stand this moment in time, and on our as a Cabinet member, we cannot support spending over £500,000 on revenue and go up to 6 million capital when we have to prioritise every penny we spend on the public out there and the core services. So I move Leader recommendations in section 9, number 1, 2 and 3. I'd like to move them to the Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Spanzik. Next, we have Councillor Good, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Janine, for the report. I pretty much mirror what Councillor Spanzik has said, really. I think in the unfortunate financial climate we find ourselves in, we don't really have any option here. As much as, you know, we've laid out these two options, ultimately, I don't think we have any way of saying anything other than option B at this point. But, you know, to hit net zero, to defend against climate change, we need bold choices. We need to take bold decisions. And it's just really unfortunate that we find ourselves at such a point of such difficult financial straits that is limiting our opportunity to build for the future, rather than just being able to, you know, make sure, as John has said, that the people out there are safeguarded for the present. I do think hydrogen is going to be a major part of energy mix in the future. And I think in the next few years, we'll find that actually it becomes as commonplace as natural gas is in homes now. I know there are a lot of people out there who perhaps have some concerns about that, and I hope that over time those concerns will be looked at and alleviated, because, you know, we cannot as a society carry on in the way that we are. And, you know, I wish that we could say today that we could move forward with this project or a similar project to help us and Wales achieve net zero, but I just don't think that financially we're there now. So I think, you know, as I say, I don't think we have any other choice other than to go for option B. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Good. Next, we have the Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you very much, Janine. I know this is sort of a big project. However, when I look at the previous report that I've just brought to Council, and I'm asking for £1 million environment for social services and £2.5 million in EMRs, I would be really loath to support this project because it doesn't safeguard people. It might safeguard our climate, but I don't think our financial position of council is able to support this at this current time. Thanks very much, Leader.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Then we have Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader. I don't really want to repeat what everybody else has said. Totally agree. It's not something that we're happy to do, but we don't have any option but to do that. I do have two questions, Janine. You have touched on them, but I just want a bit more in-depth explanation. So when we withdraw, when we withdraw, will the planning application for Highbond still go ahead because the planning department is separate to a separate department? The other question I have is, how will we determine if the project is safe if the planning application goes ahead? Thank you.
Two questions there then, please, Janine. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Farr. Yes, the planning application will just proceed as normal. It's a statutory process that we undertake as the local planning authority, BCBC. The application was submitted by Marubeni Europower, so my officers will determine that as they would with any other application. The one thing that I have said today, and I really want to try and make it clear to people who are maybe watching this Cabinet report, is that the planning permission is for land use only. So, put simply, this is a proposed industrial use on a piece of land that has a proposed industrial use on it on an industrial estate. So that is what the planning application has to determine. Of course, there are considerations such as the siting, the design, and they'll also look at transportation, for instance. But it's just about land use, and that will continue. Now, Welsh Government have reserved the right to call in the application, and they have the right, whilst we are the planning authority, they have the right to call in any application that they think is of national interest. So they have written to us to reserve that right, and what they've asked is that they see the officers' report and recommendation, and hopefully that'll be written and in place by October. We will then send that off to Welsh Government, and we'll wait for their decision as to whether they want to determine this application or whether they will pass it back to us as the local planning authority. Then what will happen is we will convene what we call a special planning committee, and the Development Control Committee of this council will decide whether to approve that application or not. So that's the planning application. It will continue, but we do have that piece where we have to refer to Welsh Government, and they may very well want to take the decision themselves, or they may pass it back to us. Now, your second question is really interesting because when we have processes such as this, the operator has to have planning permission and what we call a control of hazardous substance license. And that license allows them to operate, and it looks at a number of things, including safety, operating procedures, and all of that, and rightly so. Now, the last applicant that we had for this, we don't deal with these very often in Bridgend, I believe was at Rockwell a number of years ago when they expanded. We had an application there. Now, it's slightly different to the planning application because what happens is an application for a hazardous substance license comes into the authority. We then consult Health and Safety Executive and Natural Resources Wales, and they do all of their due diligence and look at the safety aspects, the operations, and any harm or damage to the environment from that process. Then only if they deem that application or that license application appropriate will they say to us we can approve it. It then comes back into BCBC, and then the Development Control Committee will approve that license. So both of these things will continue whether we stay in Highbond or not, because they're statutory processes. So hopefully that you can understand the distinction. However, the two are required for Marubeni to operate on that site.
Thank you for that. Janine, does that answer your question? Councillor far, or have you got an additional question?
No, it's just interesting whether we, withdraw or not. The process will continue because it's a statutory right they have for it to continue. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an important point in terms of that planning application can still go ahead if they wish that planning application to continue. And on the hazardous waste on the other application, that there would be statutory consultees, wouldn't there, in terms of Natural Resources Wales and the Health and Safety Executive as well?
Yes, that's correct, Leader. So the hazardous substance control licence is something that whilst we determine as BCBC through our planning authority, because we have that right, we are the body for determining those applications in Bridgend. It is it is dependent on what the statutory consultees tell us. If they're not happy with the application for the licence, we wouldn't approve it. It is only upon both of them being content with the information that's provided do we then grant that licence. And it would be they couldn't produce that hydrogen at that site without a planning consent and a hazardous substance control licence. They need both of those pieces in place. And they're both statutory processes, Leader, so that will continue regardless of whether BCBC are part of the project or not.
Thank you for that clarification, Janine. Next, we have Councillor Blundell, please.
Thank you, Leader. I was going to actually ask about Welsh Government and reserving the right to pull it in this plan application, but I couldn't get my hand down. It doesn't seem to want to come down at the moment. So my question's really been asked and answered, unfortunately. But I will say I do agree with my Cabinet colleagues. I think we are in a position financially now where this isn't in our purview right now. And I also think that Councillor Farr made the point that just because we're pulling out as partners now, we're sort of changing our relationship and becoming more as the statutory authority rather than a partner in this. So it doesn't pull an end to the project in its earliest infancy, I should say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. And then we have Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And I'm sure we all agree that taking difficult decisions is part of our role. And it's important we have this opportunity, this gateway review, to review this. I think our primary role here is obviously as an authority to provide services that only we can provide, and that is education, social care, and maintaining the highway network. The financial pressures that we find ourselves under are well documented. We know the pressures in social care, social services. We invested an extra £8 million at last year's budget, and they've already predicted an 11 million overspend this year. So the financial pressures that we've got are very real, very real. And whilst I understand that we have a need to reduce our impact on the planet, but our core business is combating education, social services, and highways. And therefore, we have to prioritise these key services. I don't think now is the right time for us to be supporting this, and so the only decision we can take this afternoon is to run with option B, and that is to withdraw Bridgend County Borough Council from involvement in this project. It's a difficult decision, Leader, but that's the one that I think we should do, and that's to protect this authority going forward. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams, and I would echo the sentiments of your contributions of all our colleagues. We find ourselves in a very different position to when this project first started. And the project was started for the right reasons. This was about trying to develop cleaner sources of fuel and energy in the face of rising costs and climate change. That is something we're committed to as a local authority. However, since then, our financial position has rapidly worsened. and the challenges that we face, the financial challenges we face, grow by the day. And also since the start of the project, the potential financial commitments of this project have grown and increased significantly. And before us today, we have a report that itemizes that and makes it clear that potentially we would be committing up to £6.5 million of money to this project today if we continue to be a partner. We do not have £6.5 million to commit. We have to, as colleagues have described, we have to make choices and we have to make decisions. And those choices and decisions are about prioritising essential services, unfortunately. We would like to do more to tackle climate change and to respond to that agenda. However, that is not our role alone, is it? There are other partners. There are other partners that are committed to this agenda, and other partners that will continue to innovate and demonstrate and develop different technologies. But it's clear to me, listening to colleagues this afternoon, that there is not support for us continuing to be part of this project as Bridgend County Borough Council, as a partner. As the recommendations have been moved and seconded, can I ask, is everyone in favour of the recommendations outlined in the report? And I think I will repeat them for the benefit of those people who have joined today to listen to the discussion. It obviously notes the report and the detail we're going to take in to date on this project, and it agrees to pursue option B, and that's withdrawal from the project at this stage due to the Council's inability to meet the significant financial commitments required and the timescales of this project. It's also recommended the Council has a dialogue with partners, including Welsh Government, and for them to identify an alternative route forward with Marubeni. And we will delegate authority to the Corporate Director to give notice to Marubeni of the intention to withdraw from the Memorandum of Understanding dated 8th of July 2022. So everyone is in agreement with that. But just to be clear, the benefit of the public, this is a separate process to the planning application, and that planning application is still with the authority. That planning application will be considered by this authority, unless, of course, it is called in by Welsh Government, and the public and members will be notified and kept updated on the progress of that application. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Janine. We will now receive the next report on today's agenda, and that is a report of our shared regulatory services, and it is on the SRS's annual report for 2022 to 2023. And I'm very pleased that we are joined by colleagues from SRS, and I can see that we're joined by the head of service, Helen, and one of the senior managers, Jason. So over to you, please, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the opportunity to present this afternoon to Cabinet the SRS annual report for 2022-23. And for the purposes of the recording, I'm Helen Picton, and I'm the Head of Shared Regulatory Services. So if I can take members to the background section in the report. I'm sure you will be familiar with the creation of the service, and the thinking behind that. But it is quite hard to believe that we're actually in our 9th year of operation of the service. So just a little bit of background there about how the governance works. We have a joint committee of which Councillor Good is currently chair. And Councillor Maxine Lewis also represents Bridgend County Borough Council in her role as the chair of the licensing committee. And governance then is provided through members from the 3 partner councils. So every year, the joint working agreement requires joint committee to receive no later than the end of June the annual report, which is what we're bringing to you today. It's quite prescriptive what needs to be in the annual report, but hopefully, if you've had a chance to read that as Annex 1 to this covering report, there is quite a lot of detail in there explaining what has happened over the course of 22-23, both from an operational point of view and also the financial matters too. So I'll move now to section 3 of the covering report. And what I'm going to do is to talk about some operational matters which are set out in the annual report in Annex 1. And the first thing to mention is that we've had a slight increase in sickness absence levels, and this we believe is in the aftermath of COVID and the way that COVID is reported, but also looking closely at long-term sickness, of which we've had a number of cases. I'm pleased to report that those cases are now resolved, so going forward we anticipate that picture will look much better. So when the 2022-23 year began, which obviously is the subject of the annual report, it was very much a year of change that was beginning, and the need for the service to balance the possibility of resurgence of COVID-19 against picking up on the lost ground, if you like, of the various inspection regimes, that business as usual work. The annual report also provides information on the outturn position for the service, and as with most local authority services, it was a challenging year financially. We had a shortfall, budgeted shortfall in terms of the pay award, which amounted to £268,000. So fortunately, as a result of underspends in other areas and vacancies, that was to some extent offset, but we still had an outturn deficit of £63,000 at the end of the year. Moving down through the bullet points, I'm going to mention some of the areas then that we have reported on, and specifically in relation to food. And the 22-23 annual report covers performance in relation to our food inspection regime. And at that time, we were following something called the Food Standards Agency COVID-19 Local Authority Recovery Plan, which, as the name suggests, recognised the fact that there was a shortfall in inspections as a result of environmental health officers supporting the COVID response over a period of up to 2 years. And what we found since we've gone back into the full inspection regime is an increase in enforcement action that is necessary in food premises. For example, we've been seeing quite a lot of pest infestations, and also a case of many premises that were previously quite high scoring under the food hygiene rating scheme have dropped to a lower score post-pandemic. So some work there to bring those premises up to the sort of broadly compliant standard. I move down now to 3.2, and I can update you on the public accountability measures, of which there are 3 relevant to SRS. And the first one is Public Accountability Measure 23, and this is broadly compliant food establishments. So premises are deemed to be broadly compliant if specified risk scores are achieved for cleanliness, structural issues, and confidence in the management of the business. And this is a measure of how well that food business is doing in relation to food hygiene requirements. And anything, any premises scoring a 3 rating or higher is deemed to be broadly compliant. And you'll see that premises within the county borough overall have actually increased in terms of broadly compliance. So 98% of all food businesses in the county borough during the last full financial year were deemed to be broadly compliant. And you'll see that that has been a gradual increase over the years. The other 2 public accountability measures relevant to shared regulatory services are PAM 013 and 045, and both of these relate to empty properties being brought back into use. So all of that information is detailed in the annual report, but hopefully this covering report gives some edited highlights of some of the results of that work, which again has been very positive. I'll move on to section 3.3 now, and bringing into the conversation the SRS business plan, which I've also attached to this covering report as Annex 2. And what we're looking at here is within that business plan, some of the ways in which the service has enabled the County Borough Council to support certain corporate priorities and challenges. And again, I've just pulled out a number of highlights, hopefully, to demonstrate that. So empty properties is a big one in that regard, and some information there on that work. The next bullet point, obviously air quality, an important issue for the council, and I'm not going to dwell on air quality in this covering report because Jason is here to do the full thing shortly. I mentioned earlier what a year of change 22-23 was, a little bit turbulent, we might say, at the start. And the next bullet point on Homes for Ukraine, I think, demonstrates the way in which the service was able to step up at that time and was able to carry out inspections of properties which host families wish to open up for individuals from Ukraine to be able to use during that time. And across the shared service, some 500 such properties were checked for making sure that it was suitable host accommodation by SRS officers, and roughly in line with the population split, around 25% of the properties that were inspected were within the county borough. So again, a nice achievement for us to be able to contribute to that. The next bullet point is on the climate change agenda, and again, this is the detail of all of this is in the annual report itself. But I just wanted to highlight this because this is a new area of work for us, and it relates to something called the Minimum Energy Efficiency Standards, or another acronym of MEES, for domestic private rented properties. So this area is regulated, and the requirement currently is that if a property is being let out, then its energy performance in terms of the EPC, it has to be of a rating of E or above. So F and G properties were allowed previously, they aren't any longer. So this piece of work, which SRS has been gearing up for over the course of 22-23, is to establish exactly what those ratings are, where those properties are, and then making contact with them, working with those landlords and letting agents to ensure that they actually bring those properties up to the required standard. So as I say, 22-23 was a year in which the sort of infrastructure was put in place to facilitate that. But in this current financial year, I'll give you a little sneak peek of how that work is progressing. I mentioned the indicators that we're able to report on, which we're starting to do for Q1. And just one of those, a reduction in carbon tonnage for Q1, the work we've done with landlords and letting agents of properties being let out with F or G ratings in the county borough, that equates to an improvement in their carbon tonnage emissions of around 50 tonnes, which I think is quite an impressive figure for that first quarter. It wouldn't be an annual report without mentioning our work on animal health and welfare, and that in fact is the next bullet point. And again, capturing what is included in the annual report, I'm talking about the awards that the animal health and welfare team received through the RSPCA Paw Prints scheme in 2022. And that, as you'll see, involved them receiving 2 golds and a bronze award. But again, obviously we're reporting looking back over quite some time now, and the latest update on that, which I've included in this bullet point, is to advise that the 2023 results of the RSPCA awards are even more favourable for the Animal Health and Welfare team, and they've actually got a hat-trick now of 3 gold awards, which we're really, really delighted about. Prosecutions, we report on this, and you'll see that the full set of successful prosecutions is included in Appendix 2 to the annual report itself. But again, if I may just pull out some edited highlights of some cases which concluded over the course of 22-23 relating to issues that arose in the county borough. So the first one, case 1 that I've highlighted, is in relation to a restaurant which received a low food hygiene rating of 1, which equates to major improvement being necessary. And the premises decided not to display the food hygiene rating of 1. They also misled officers during the course of that investigation, and as a result, they were prosecuted for failure to display and for obstruction during the course of their dealings with the officers. So that section there explains what the outcome of that particular case was. I've grouped together cases 2 and 3 because they're quite similar, and this is food on sale after the use-by date in two different corner shops. And you'll see in the detail there that certainly one item of food was on display 28 days after its use-by date. And the whole purpose of the use-by date is to give customers assurance that food that's perishable is safe to eat. And clearly, after a use-by date, that can't be guaranteed. And then case 4, a little bit different again, is in relation to a case where officers served a notice on an individual to rectify the very, very poor state of 2 buildings. Again, there was non-compliance, and despite every effort of officers to get that compliance, the individual didn't take that help, and the case was prosecuted. So hopefully that's a little flavour of the vast or the huge diversity of cases that are taken by the service across the county borough. So I mentioned the business plan for 23-24, which is also appended to the report. And I thought it would be quite nice to conclude, after having looked back at 22-23, with just a look at some of the challenges and emerging themes for the service over this current financial year. So the first one here under 3.3, again, need further to recover that lost ground on our inspection programme, investigations and paid for services as a result of the COVID interruptions. The second bullet point is for us to address difficulties in recruitment and retention, and this is a piece of work that's ongoing across the service at the moment to make sure that we can recruit the very best staff from a limited recruitment pool, it has to be said, which is the case across the UK, and crucially then to retain those staff. And key amongst that is the development of a regulatory apprenticeship, which I'm really pleased to advise that Welsh Government is progressing, and I'm currently chairing the steering group for that, so it is making progress. The third bullet point here of some of the emerging issues, we can't have escaped seeing the media coverage of concerns about the vapes market, and clearly this is an area that trading standards within the service is very involved with. So things around underage sales, around 24% of all attempts to purchase a vape product by a child result in a sale. The marketing, the presentation, the flavours, the colours, obviously looking at those aspects as well, and also product safety, because some of these illegal products that don't comply with the specifications actually contain things like heavy metals as well. So a big area for us, and we are actually taking part in a Public Health Wales-led incident response group on the subject of vaping in children and young persons. The next bullet point, it's not going away anytime soon. Illegal dog breeding, a huge problem, and there are a number of cases in the pipeline on that, and some quite nasty cases coming through in terms of animal welfare, and some of those links to the wider organised crime. I've mentioned the need for us to stay one step ahead of rogue traders, doorstep criminals and illegal money lenders. It probably sounds easier than it actually is, but crucially now with the cost of living crisis, these people are out trying to exploit the difficulties that many residents continue to find themselves in. And we also have quite a range of new legislation coming our way. Things coming out of Welsh Government and UK Government, and a good example of that is the special procedures regime, which relates to practitioners of tattooing, piercing, acupuncture and electrolysis, and a new licensing regime will come into effect, we think, mid-2024, so we're gearing up for that, and a requirement of licensing for those practitioners is that they sit a specified course, a prescribed course, and SRS is actually one of just a few accredited training centres for delivery of that course. So we're in the process of training up quite a lot of those practitioners at the moment. So that's a really quick whistle-stop tour through an awful lot of detail which is appended to the covering report. So I think I will just take you now to section 9 and the recommendation, which is to note the Shared Regulatory Services Annual Report for 2022-23, and of course I'm very happy to take questions.
Thanks so much, Helen, for that comprehensive report on such a wide-ranging service. I know a number of colleagues want to come in, so I'll bring Councillor Good first, then Councillor Spanzik, then Councillor Blundell. Councillor Good, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Helen, for taking us through the report. As ever, you raise all the salient points and steal all of my speaking notes. But just to come back on a couple of points, I think once again, we see a service that's really delivering for the borough, and I think it says a lot about what we can do when we share work across the region. And I think it's been a real positive experience to see what SRS are delivering, both within Bridgend and as chair of the Shared Regulatory Committee as well, like seeing the work that is done in the Vale and in Cardiff too. And I think it is a real testament to the team and being able to work across such a wide area with very different needs across 3 different boroughs. So I think that's really excellent. You know, and I think the other thing that should be touched on is, you know, Helen has mentioned various cases where prosecutions have been achieved or are currently in the pipeline. And I think it shouldn't be forgotten that with a lot of these cases, the evidential bar for prosecution is very, very high and often very difficult to achieve that information to take it to court. So I think, again, you know, in terms of the public having that faith that we do as an authority and as a service really take a huge amount of time, and it takes a lot of expertise and skill to get these cases to court. So I think that really must be celebrated. I think it's great to hear that Bridgend is 98% compliant with food standards, particularly with all the great new restaurants that are opening up in Bridgend. You know I bang on about us being a foodie hub, but I think that's a really positive thing for us to see, and I think it's really great that people can be reassured that when they are eating in one of the wonderful new restaurants in Bridgend Town Centre, they're eating very good quality, well-prepared food that's very hygienically prepared. So that's positive. I would just take a moment as well to mention the issues around recruitment and retention. It's something that, you know, we all know across councils and across the public sector we've struggled with, and I think, again, in a service which is highly specialised, where people require an awful lot of expertise to do these roles, I think it's really reassuring to see the attitude towards growing your own, and that not sort of sitting on laurels and relying on adverts on a job website to get these recruits, but actually going out there into further education, higher education, and finding those people and selling that idea of this being a really positive career that can move your career very far. And I think that's a really great thing to see. I think the apprenticeships is really exciting. I'm really glad Welsh Government is supporting that. And I hope to see that coming online soon, because again, I think it's showing people that regardless of what level of qualification you have, there is also a really positive career to be found in the public sector. So I think that's really brilliant. Just on a final note, Helen mentioned the increasing issue we're finding around underage vaping and disposable vapes. Welsh Government has recently sort of pushed, I know they are talking to UK Government about having a ban on disposable vapes. I personally think that could come soon enough. You know, it's really great to hear that Public Health Wales is taking action on this, very proactively setting up task groups to deal with this. I know from my own community, and I've seen a number of young people using them, and we are trying desperately to discourage it as a community. But you know, it's a difficult sell when parents are seen using them all the time. But not only is it a health risk, I think we must remember as well that it's a considerable risk to our environment. Getting rid of these products is very, very difficult. Helen and I have discussed previously in our one-to-one meetings how, you know, we seize all of these illegal vapes, but actually disposing of them safely is increasingly difficult. So it is something we need to take action on. I think it's really great the work that SRS are doing, and I'll leave it on that note. But I'm very, very pleased with the service that we are being provided, and I think it's testament to the team. So thank you, Helen, and thank you for the team.
Absolutely, Councillor Good is a real success story and an exemplar of what we can do when we collaborate together with neighbouring local authorities. Councillor Spanzik is next, please.
Thank you, Leader. And I thought then you were going to pinch my thunder then, because the next part, which is great to see, and it touches every part of what we do, is a climate change agenda, which you mentioned, Helen, and it's great to hear that I think it's 50 tonnes of carbon you think you believe is being saved by the energy efficiency regulations with properties. And I'd just like to expand that a bit further if I can, the F&G rated properties, how that works in practice, because we had a housing briefing last week and one of the members in the Garrow Valley was saying, well, it's difficult for people in some properties, very poor properties. It's not to say all landlords are the same, but they're afraid to sort of complain about things because of the conditions in properties, and landlords then threatening eviction, even though there's rules around that. So I want to know, because I'm assuming, I might be wrong, that some of these F&G properties, there are people living in some of them because landlords are renting them, how we get under the regulations there. So what are the consequences for landlords out there who fail to engage and do not bring the property to standard and maybe fall into this category and costing the tenants hundreds, if not thousands of pounds a year in trying to heat the properties and stop them getting damp, even though they are extremely damp in some. So how that works in practice and what are the consequences? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik, and thank you for flagging that in the report. One area of, it's such a diverse set of services that we provide through the SRS that many people wouldn't even know that we provide that service. So Helen, please.
Thanks, Councillor Spanzik, for the question. This, as I mentioned, is a new area of work for us. So we're approaching it very much through the lens of working with those landlords and those letting agents to seek compliance. It is a stepped process, so some have got back in touch with us, some are making the necessary improvements. Others, we're having radio silence, so there's a way that we then will remind them that they need to come back to us. So it's all about working and supporting, putting them where we can in touch with potential sources of funding to have work done. But what I would mention as well is that the legislation stipulates that there are a number of exemptions, so it may not be possible in all cases for F&G properties to be brought up. So the landlord or letting agent would need to register a bona fide exemption. They can't just say they're exempt, it has to be vetted and approved as being a proper exemption, and that would be for things such as, I don't know, a listed building, or if the cost is just so extreme that it wouldn't be economic to do. But they do need to demonstrate that it is a bona fide exemption before they can make use of that.
Thank you for that, Helen. Next we have Councillor Blundell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a question from me. We spoke about disposable vapes and the selling of them, and obviously it's very good work that the Public Health Wales and the Welsh Government are going to be coming out of that, and hopefully UK Government will ban them. But where should members of the public go if they believe that shops are selling these, especially to underage children, especially in school uniforms, because they are being used in schools and we are trying to crack down on that? So what should members of the public do if they suspect someone is selling these products to underage children?
Thanks, Councillor Blundell. Helen, please.
Yes, thank you. But a number of routes. Obviously, we would like to very much hear about that so that we can best target our resources for test purchasing programmes. So the usual SRS contact numbers, but there are other ways to do that too. If a resident didn't feel that they wanted to sort of snitch on a local shop, it can be done through things like Crime Stoppers, and it can be done through various anonymous routes. There's an Ash Wales website called No Ifs, No Buts. It's Welsh Government funded, but it's operated by Ash Wales. And that, again, is a vehicle for taking intelligence from residents who would rather not give their details. And that then helps us to build the intelligence picture so that we can best target resources at the premises that are being most complained about.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blundell. Would you like to move the report?
I thought Councillor Good had. Just sort of one of those things you sort of expect them to do first week. But yes, I will move the report.
For that. And do I have a seconder for the report as well?
I'll second it since I forgot to move it in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor Good. And I think it is important to reflect on the success of the service. There's 4 examples there of where we've taken enforcement action and we've reached the court arena. What I would say is that as always the last resort, and we will always exhaust other opportunities first before we reach that stage. And it is a testament to the work that we do with our cafes and restaurant owners across Bridgend that we've got such a high level of compliance. It's because they have very high standards but also we encourage people to reach out to us for support, don't we? Advice and training, which is available. I did want to flag, as well as the award-winning work that we do around animal welfare, the other area of work around empty properties. I think it is of note that we currently have 6 properties that are subject to ongoing enforcement action. So again, that is a reminder to those owners of properties that if you do not take action and your property is left to go to rack and ruin, we will act. And if necessary, we will take court action. However, before we reach that stage, there is a process. There's a process where we will look to support owners of properties because there are grants and loans available. So once again, we'll make that plea to people that own properties to come forward to get help and support from us. But if you're not going to come forward to get help and support, and if you're not going to bring that empty property back into use and keep it in a reasonable condition and a safe condition, then we will act. The recommendation's been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please? And thank you once again. Please pass on our appreciation. I'm sure not just Cabinet members, but all members would like to share our appreciation with your staff. We won't forget the work that they did, particularly during the pandemic, and we know that the service is still recovering from that in the sense of the backlog that was built up. We'll now move on to the next report. Again, this is on the work of our shared regulatory service. We will have a break after this, a comfort break after this report. I'm very mindful that we have been in this meeting for nearly 2 hours. So I'll now invite Jason, our Operational Manager, Enterprise and Special Services in the Shared Regulatory Service, to give us an update on our local air quality management annual progress report. Jason, please.
Yes, thanks, Leader. Yeah, Jason Bell, Operational Manager, Enterprise and Specialist Services. Just outlining, obviously, the purpose of this report is to seek approval of the 2023 annual progress report for local air quality management. And this is reporting on our data sets obtained from 2022. So it's not this year's data, it's actually last year's data, but being reported this year. The report also then provides a brief update on progress under the Air Quality Action Plan for Park Street, which is the only air quality management area declared in Bridgend, and also provides details of a public health campaign that we're looking to undertake over the coming years. So just as a bit of a background, this is a statutory report. We have to produce it every year under our requirements under Section 82 of the Environment Act 1995. And every local authority in Wales has a statutory requirement to regularly review and assess the air quality in their areas. So this is done as an annual review. And this report provides the update, as I said, for the 2022 data. The full report is attached as Appendix 1 to the report and provides all the data for 2022. So just moving to the current situation. So the report outlines that only 2 sites across Bridgend failed to achieve the air quality objective for nitrogen dioxide. And those 2 locations are, as you would expect, in the air quality management area on Park Street. All other locations, as I said, within Bridgend County Borough Council continue to meet all the other relevant air quality objectives. So just going back to the Park Street Air Quality Management Area, this was obviously declared back in 1st of January 2019, and we've been regularly monitoring and increasing monitoring work undertaken in that area. The report presents the 2 locations known as OBC 110 and OBC 123 recorded concentrations of 47.2 micrograms per meter cubed and 45.5 micrograms, which exceed the objective of 40 micrograms as an annual average. However, this does show an improvement of approximately 12 and 17% at those two locations since the air quality management area was declared in 2019. And we've tried to show the trends there in the data in figure 3 of the report, just under paragraph 3.4, which does show, you can see the decreases on those two locations of OBC 110 and OBC 123, however, still exceeding the objective. The main reasons, obviously, is those locations are on Park Street. They do have higher concentrations due to the proximity of those houses to the heavily trafficked primary route of Park Street and the congestion that is faced on there. It also is exacerbated by the gradient of the road as well, which prevents the dispersion of the pollutants. All the other monitoring locations on Park Street itself does show compliance with the NO2 objective. So the report does give a brief update on the Air Quality Management Action Plan, which again is a statutory requirement for the Council to produce. This was delayed, obviously, with the onset of the pandemic as work started pre-pandemic, and we've been progressing that since. I won't go too much detail on the action plan itself because obviously we're just about to finalise that, and we'll be bringing a separate report which will give it the due attention it deserves, really. But what the action plan is, as set out, there is a few options that we have assessed and undertaken detailed monitoring and modelling to show, by implementing those measures, what they will do to the NO2 levels on Park Street. If you move to looking at table 1 in the report, that presents the modelling data of the measures that we've presented in the action plan, basically. What it does show is, with the full measures, if they were fully implemented by the end of this year, pretty much all the monitoring locations, the existing monitoring locations, get compliance. However, some of the modelled receptor locations still show that the NO2 objective will be exceeded beyond 2023. And further measures will need to be looked at with the action plan as we progress it. We did do a 12-week public consultation on the measures that are presented in the action plan, and we've taken the feedback from that consultation and some further comments from Welsh Government to help finalise the action plan. One of those exercises we've been asked to do is to actually try and project, even with all the measures in place, when compliance would be achieved on Park Street. And it's not detailed in the report itself, it will be detailed in the action plan, but currently the modelling there shows that compliance is projected to be achieved by 2026. And we will detail the full explanation of that in the final action plan, which will be presented, as I said, in a separate report to Cabinet. Just moving on to section 3.25, this starts and outlines a project we're looking to implement over the coming years, basically, which is a public health behavioural change campaign using funding that we secured from the Welsh Government's Local Air Quality Management Support Fund. It was a bid that was put in for this year's funding. The grant-funded project is going to look to implement additional air quality sensors in a number of locations, but also on Park Street itself, just to show the levels that we are getting on Park Street. And the project then look to take the evidence that the sensors are providing and then evaluate the success of improving public awareness, improving knowledge, and reducing exposure, and giving options for members of the public to take actions themselves to reduce their exposure to air pollution, and hopefully improving ambient air pollution across Bridgend as a county as a whole, basically. The intention will be to have a borough-wide website detailing air quality data. It will provide a focal point for people to access data and monitoring results and analysis and additional messages to help encourage public behaviour and changing in behaviours to improve air quality across the borough as a whole. So, as the report says, we've attained funding for £147,000 and £141,000, and this is a 4-year project, basically, that we'll be looking to procure over the coming months and looking to launch early next year, hopefully, once we do all the procurement on that, basically. So, just moving to the recommendations of the report itself in section 9. Cabinet is recommended to note the results of the air quality monitoring gathered in 2022 and approve our 2023 annual progress report, which is attached as Appendix 1, so that we can submit that to Welsh Government as a statutory requirement, and then to note the progress made on the development of the Air Quality Action Plan, and that a separate report will be forthcoming to Cabinet in due course.
Thank you for that detailed report, Jason, and the continued work of the team on this important area of life, the County Borough. Councillor Good is first, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Jason, for taking us through the report. I think the first thing to be noted here is that we are very lucky in Bridgend that we have one area of concern that's not meeting air quality standards. And I think as someone who spent over a decade and a half living in London, I can tell you firsthand the impact on health and well-being that poor air quality has. So I think not only is it really positive that we as a borough are taking action on the areas where we do have bad air quality, but I think it's really positive that we're very lucky to live in an area which does have good air quality, because it can have a real impact on people's lives. So I fully endorse this work, and I'm happy to move the report before I forget again, and I have to ask Councillor Blundell to do it. I'm happy to move the report, and I look forward to seeing the detail on Park Street next month in Cabinet, because I think it is important for the residents on that street that we do get that right, because it's important that everyone in our borough can live lives that aren't affected by poor air quality. So I think this is a great step forward. It's really positive to see the work moving forward, and I'd move the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Good, and you're absolutely right to highlight the fact that in other parts of the UK where air quality is much worse, and indeed is a danger, and it is a danger in London, and it does result in the loss of lives in London. We're lucky here that air quality is much better, but we have to carefully monitor it, and we have to ensure that we continue to improve air quality. And that's what's evidenced today in the report. And there's more to do, and that's not being complacent. There is more to do, and that's what the plan sets out. Deputy Leader is next, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I think this report today is quite topical, considering the introduction of the 20-mile-an-hour limit earlier on this week. And I've done my own research into some of this, because my first experience of driving was in Germany at 20 miles per hour. And actually, the Imperial College has reported that air quality is no worse at 20 miles per hour, and indeed that brake and tyre wear, which contributes to particulate pollution, is significantly reduced. So I'm all for this. I think it's an excellent example of why we should be reducing the speed limit, but also it's more safe for our residents when they're outside breathing bloody fumes. Sorry, pardon my language, I shouldn't have sworn, it's a public meeting. But I'm more than happy to second this report.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. And then we've got Councillor Spanzer, please.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. And following on from that, I'm not going to mention the 20 mile hour. There's plenty of debate on that, but the fact is progress on the chart shows in 2019, Park Street, I think 11 monitors that were red, and even now with only 2 left, they're only just, I think it's 41.9, they're just over the 40. We're almost to the point where there's no monitors, no red sort of marks. Because earlier this year, I had members asking about Pencoed level crossing, because members of Pencoed were concerned that there was red hotspots there, but clearly there's not. There's concerns about pollution with the railway line and the hold-ups that causes, but that's still not triggering anywhere near the red areas. So these 2 in Park Street, we've done some works on the lights, the new traffic has gone in, and there's some suggestions that they could be tweaked and remodelled, but we still have to be very careful that unintended consequences there with anything to do with those lights could have knock-on effects, so we don't want to happen elsewhere. So, the whole network and the gyratory and Bridgend Town Centre. But great work, and I'm glad to see that Park Street is going the right direction, and next year perhaps there won't be any reds. Who knows? Possibly.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spandic, and you're right to highlight the impact that the changes to traffic lights, but also the new holding lane that we introduced on Park Street as well has had an impact, and that's to be welcomed, isn't it? Okay, well, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please?
Aye.
Thank you once again, colleagues. We will now take a short comfort break of 10 minutes. So I want everyone back here in the chamber at 22. So I will see you all then. Thank you, colleagues.